Well, I am thrilled that you're here with me today. I celebrated my 65th birthday, as some of you may know that you've been listening. It was great. I had a wonderful day. Went on a hike, ate some delicious cake and some really fancy ice cream that some friends on the East Coast sent me. Wow, it was just a great day. Anyway, I'm happy that you're here today, and I'm happy that you're taking the time to be here and to listen and to be part of this community. So, today we're going to talk about something that we all wish we had a whole lot more of. No, not money, but yeah, that would be great too. So, go buy those lottery tickets because we know that you can't win if you don't play. Okay, but we're not going to talk about money today. Today, we're going to talk about time. We all are constantly making comments about time. Either we don't have enough of it, it goes by too quickly, or we use it as an excuse to say, well, if I had more time, I'd work out. Or if I had more time, I would look for a new job. Or if I had more time, I would fill in the blank, right? Well, my guest today is going to show us that there is a different way to look at time and think about time and how to have more time for the things that actually matter. So put on your headphones, pop in your earbuds, turn up the volume if you're in the car and you have the windows down, and just sit back and listen to my conversation with my guest, David Buck. I hope he'll change your mind about time. Alrighty, it is time to stop hitting snooze and awaken to a life worth being, the fun and inspiring podcast that dives deep into what makes life truly fulfilling. I'm your host, Sue Willoughby, a self-proclaimed badass transformational life coach for women over 40. Join me as I explore the extraordinary journeys of ordinary people who've transformed their lives from the inside out. Tune in weekly to uncover the secrets to smashing through your perceived limits and creating a life that's not just well lived, but totally worth being. Welcome back to A Life Worth Being. My guest today is David Buck. He's got over 35 years in business development, and that provided David with a strong awareness of what it took for people to be productive and efficient, not just busy. I think we're all really good at being busy. It doesn't necessarily mean we are being productive or efficient. Through personal exploration into work-life balance, that led David to start Kairos Management Solutions and then the Infinity Lifestyle Design Program, which I'm really excited to hear about today. Earlier this year, David released his first book entitled The Time Optimized Life. David, welcome to A Life Worth Being. I can't wait to dig into all of this time stuff.
Thank you, Sue, so much. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So tell us what is the difference between time management and time optimization? Because I think that I know myself personally, this is not one of my strong points, time management. I tend to be very busy from time to time, pun intended, but not always, at the end of the day saying, what have I really accomplished here? So what can you tell me about that?
Well, that's in essence, a lot of people, when they try to manage their time, it's a very reactive process. So they might plan something out or things out for the day, and then they find that something comes in the middle of the day that interrupts them. And many people do the last in, first out. So they go to manage their time, and they might manage that block of time very successfully. But then once they're done, they still have all the other things that they wanted to accomplish during the day, and they find they're running out of time. So I ask people to flip the script. And in essence, for you to look at being more proactive with your time. So that means planning upfront, understanding, trying to think what the future might bring, knowing none of us are perfect at predicting it. But in that process, You understand that you now are setting up blocks of time that are important to you, and that allows you then, when those interruptions come your way, you're in a better position to either prioritize what's important or negotiate, particularly if it's someone coming at you wanting to use your time to solve their problem.
Okay, so time blocking, I heard you say, right? And now explain that. I am familiar with that concept, but can you dig a little bit deeper into the whole time blocking thing and how that what that looks like?
Yeah, there's various different aspects of time blocking. Some of the more pure forms say that you block for 55 minutes, take a break for 5, or it's periodic blocks with breaks continuously. I don't subscribe to that. Hey, if it works for you, great. What I say is look at your calendar 2 weeks out and plan it 2 weeks out continuously. And I use the term wet cement. And the reason why is when you pour cement, it's there, it's solid, but it's contained in a foundation until it dries and cures. And the reason why time planning is wet cement is chances are you're going to have to adjust the foundation a little bit. Something's going to come your way, going to adjust. So the idea is you block as much time on your calendar as possible with important things with a level of flexibility so that, again, you have this opportunity to challenge back when other people want to use your time, or if something comes your way, to have the confidence to say, I can do this, or I've got to go back and plan a little bit more to readjust in order to accomplish it.
You make it sound so easy, David. I, and I'm only saying that because, like, I think I started out the conversation by saying, yeah, this is not my strong point. And honestly, I would love to. And I hate to use the word procrastinator because I think that that word is overused and wrongly used a lot. Right? When I was a kid, I would put things off to the last minute, but it was only because if I could do something that I was getting instant gratification from, and I still do this, right? And that is, I think, what you're referring to as that busy, right? Not being productive or efficient, but being busy instead. It's like, well, I did all of these things today, and like, and did you move the needle, right? Is that kind of
Mm-hmm.
what because that's kind of
Yes.
how I work. And I think as an entrepreneur, and I mean, when I was in corporate America, it was different. My days were much more structured. I don't tend to be that structured of a person, but your days were more structured. Did I still put projects off? Yes, of course I did. But so I would love for, how can someone like me shift to a system like you're describing, and that you is that what your book is about?
So, well, my book is actually about identifying what works well for you. I put out a series of scenarios, tools, opportunities, examples, but ultimately, to your point, Sue, we all are going to operate differently. And what works well for me may not work well for you. And so the concept behind it is I like to use a phrase, not mine, I borrow from my old boss: creep, crawl, walk, run. So I just explained an entire system of time blocking. I don't expect you to start to do your whole calendar. I'd start with a day. Try to plan a day out. See how that goes. Play with that a while to say you till you get in enough cadence, then go to 2 days, then expand out. Whatever you choose to do, start small, see that you're gaining incremental things, adapt according to your life, what's going on with you. And then ultimately, when you stick with it long enough, it'll become an ingrained habit that works well for you. So that if one person loves to time block or use an electronic calendar, another person likes to write everything into a planner, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you are being most efficient.
I see. Okay. And I would really love to be more efficient. I do tend to get distracted very easily, and I know that about myself. And I think that I'm not alone in that camp. And I mean, what are some tips and tricks that you can use to minimize distractions?
So I'll define first my view of distraction so everybody kind of understands.
And
So to me, a distraction is where you intentionally take your focus off of something important and put it on something less important. You own it. It's nobody else's fault but yours because you have chosen to move your focus. That's where it's a difference between an interruption, which is an external thing that you may or may not control, but still has a lot of impact to your time. Distractions, just own it. And so to me, distractions is my number one time management or time optimization challenge. I still deal with that. And the and the big, I got to speak truth. And for most of us, it is distractions, at least from an assessment I use with clients. That bubbles up to the top. And our number one distraction overall is our smartphone.
I was just going to pick it up and hold it up in front of the camera. Yes,
There,
I'm holding. For those of you who are just listening, yes, pick up that smartphone. That is a huge distraction.
it is the most modern productive tool that has been put into our hands. I just go back to your 30-year-old self and put a smartphone in your hands and just imagine how amazed you would be. It'd be science fiction almost. And in this case, though, it's also designed to distract you with either the texting, the apps, the notifications that you have on it. It's designed to make you stop what you're doing and spend time with it. And so, you held up your phone. My phone is actually off to the side. It's quarantined because I don't want to take the chance of a notification coming up while we're talking here and me being distracted by it. That's how much of a challenge it is for me. So I go back to the creep, crawl, walk, run. If you're sitting there going, I am so distracted by either my phone or whatever, then start to quarantine it for short periods of time. Knowing that even if it's a half an hour, chances are in your life, nothing is going to be that important in a half an hour that it can't wait. And then I think when you find that half an hour can turn into an hour, the Facebook post that you put in the morning, it's probably not going viral. You don't need to check on it. And if not, yeah.
You never know.
And that's where
Check it every 5 seconds.
And that's what the apps are designed to have us do, is to have us consume time on them. And so I try to tell people that it can wait. In most cases, it can wait. And if you feel, though, you're getting the urge to check, then I'm like, okay, can you scratch the itch for 5 minutes instead of a half an hour? Can you then turn the clock on instead of holding it off for a half an hour? Can you turn the clock on for 5 minutes and only check for 5 minutes and then shut it off? But one way or the other, you're introducing guardrails and discipline on either way you choose to approach it.
I think that is a great suggestion. And I do, either put it in airplane mode. Sometimes I'll just turn it off. I recently went to a show, a concert, or well, actually it was a comedy performance. It was the Ellen DeGeneres show. And when you walked into the venue, she was also recording, but I think a lot more artists are doing this now so that they don't have to monitor cell phone use and recording and so forth. You put it in this little bag that it's electronically sealed, and you keep the bag with you on your person, but you cannot get it unlocked. It is sealed up. At the end of the show, you take it, they tap it right on their demagnetizing thing. Boop, it pops open, and your watch too if you have a smartwatch. Take it back out, and you're free to go. But so there's this a few thousand people sitting there staring at each other because their phones are locked down, right? They can't access them, and they're like, going through withdrawals. But Yeah.
Meanwhile, you get to focus on the reason why you're there, which is Ellen DeGeneres, who's a humorous individual. And why not enjoy the show then? You paid for it.
Yeah. And whoever you came with.
Right. Yes.
And
Yeah.
maybe the person sitting next to you that you didn't come with. So yeah, I think that is a really good tip, and I do try to do that because you're right. They're designed to be needy. These devices are needy, and we are designed to take good care of them, like those little, electronic creatures, right? Where you have to make sure that they're fed and watered and whatever. They're kind of like that. You have to take care of them, make sure that they're.
Yeah. I call it my electronic pacifier. I mean, it's like if I don't have it, I'm a little anxious and like, where's my binky? Where's my, yes, yes.
I went to the store the other day and I left it home. I'm like, oh my God, I hope it's okay. How can I check on it? Should I have someone
Well,
go
I'll, well,
check?
I'll go for a walk and I'll say, oh, wait, I don't have my phone. The steps won't count.
Right. That's why I had the watch too, right?
Very
Watch
good.
too.
Very good.
I use the watch. This is how bad I am. I use the watch to find the phone inside my house. Okay, so we digress with our electronic devices. So that's a really good tip when you're working on something. I've also heard, and I don't know if this is something that you may adopt in your time optimization, but for those of us with short attention span theater, work sprints or working in like short, like, half-hour sprints and then taking, 2 minutes or whatever. And then you kind of said something like that where there was an hour and then take a break. Is that similar to like a work sprint? I've heard that's kind of a newer thing that I've heard about.
It is actually Elon Musk is famous for that, where he will do a block of like 20 minutes, take a 5 minute break, or he'll even go down as low as 10 minutes. I don't recommend that a lot. I like the concepts of finding deep work. Now, I do believe it's important to take a break and to take more than one break. And I define a break as getting away from, number one, any screens and removing yourself from your environment. So for me, 2 to 3 breaks a day for me is to take the dog outside and we go walk around the block. Helps me reset that. However, if you are in a period where you're focused and you're rolling pretty well in your work, don't necessarily stop for the sake of stopping. Continue to work. It doesn't mean you work 4, 5, 6 hours straight, but it's okay if you're like, wow, I'm an hour and a half into this. I'm in a groove.
Yeah.
Maintain the groove, but then at some point, to use an economics term, you get a marginal return, a decreasing marginal return. And at that point, it's probably good to then take a break if you're finding that you're not as focused, so that you can reset and then come back in it and get into another zone of productivity. So define the time that's comfortable for you based upon your work schedule and the environment you work in, but definitely introduce stoppages into your workflow to help you re-energize and reset.
That's great. Yeah, thanks for that, David. I do agree with you. Because sometimes I've tried that, not like a 10-minute sprint, because to me that's just like, I can't like, oh, okay. If it's like maybe I started with 30 minutes or something, and I found that once I was into it, at least for that 30 minutes, I didn't necessarily want to stop because, like you said, I felt like I was in more of a groove and in more of a rhythm. And I'm like, okay, I actually feel like I'm accomplishing something. So let's go with it. But like you said, you don't go to the point where you have to go to the bathroom so badly that you can't, or whatever else is, like you said, you get burnt out, especially if you are working on a computer or which, most of us will be. And I do find that going actually outside in fresh air is a big difference. Now, if I don't have that option, I mean, when I was in corporate America, I would get up to go to the restroom, and I would go to the restroom we were in a huge building. I would go to the restroom on the other side of the building, and I would walk like down the stairs and then up the other stairs, and just make it like so that my body felt like it was moving, get the circulation going back, and then I could go back and focus again ish.
That's a great tip. That's a great tip.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I try. Like I said, I try, but I do get very easily distracted. So I like the idea of either not having your phone in the room with you, or whatever, and getting a sense of at what point the returns are diminished, right? Whether it's 45 minutes or an hour and a half, we all kind of know when we get like, oh boy, me, I know, like, oh geez, I wish I had some chips, or it's like, okay, I
Right,
want to
right.
eat something now. Okay, that's the time to get up and not necessarily go have a cupcake, but go do something. That to me is my trigger. Like I get kind of antsy and I don't want to sit in the chair anymore. Yeah.
And that's really good what you mentioned is about identifying those triggers. What are those triggers for you that's going to do that? For me, I find like the browser gets opened up. It doesn't get opened up magically. I think it does, but all of a sudden the browser's up and I'm going, wait a minute, I didn't need to have the browser up. My mind is telling me maybe I need to take a break. And that break doesn't need to be opening a browser up to do something else to make myself think I'm productive. Maybe I just need to step away for a little bit and come back.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Like, oh, geez, look what happened. And that's another thing too. Even on your, not just the distractions of your phone, but on your computer. Like closed. If you're not doing email, right? And which have another question coming up. Close those things that you're not using. Like you said, the browser or the whatever you're not using. Do you find also that when you're creating time blocks, having those blocks not just be blocks, but blocks for something specific? And I think you might have managed that, like email. Email is one of those things where you could be doing that all day long, right? I've got 5 different email addresses that I monitor, right? But so do you also recommend, kind of, if you're doing it for a certain time frame, during that time frame you're working on X, whatever X is?
Yes. And what I find is that people have a tendency to disassociate their task list with their computer. So with their calendar. So what happens is that I'll ask usually a new client, I said, show me your calendar. They'll open up their electronic calendar and it's populated with a bunch of blocks with open time. And I'll say, okay, what's going on with the blocked time? Well, it's usually a meeting they've facilitated to have done, or someone else has asked them to attend that meeting. And I say, so what's happening in the open times? And they usually say, well, I'll kind of work on my tasks or do certain things. I say, well, what if somebody asks you to be part of a meeting? You've got a meeting bully who's like, you're going to be here. And boom, they throw a meeting in the time that you were going to work on your most important task. How do you know that? Well, I'll just go to the meeting and try to figure out later. And that's where I ask people, marry your calendar and your tasks. And so it can be like 4 or 5 of your tasks could be lower level tactical things like checking email, doing administrative stuff. Those could be grouped together in a block of time that just simply says administrative tasks. But for the most important ones, you should really be defining those in your calendar in the times that you want to do it, understanding that depending on what your role is and what you do, someone still might need your time. But when you put it there, that puts you back in the negotiation status to say, wait a minute, you're interrupting time for a high priority of mine. Can we talk about maybe doing what you need to do at a later date? Because I've got something really important that needs to get done.
Yeah, that's really a good idea. And I, like I said, I've tried to incorporate some of that stuff as well, like for certain blocks in the morning to do that, because I tend to be more productive in the morning. I just am. I've got by the afternoon time, it's like whatever. I
Mm-hmm.
get distracted. I'm like, oh, I have to go see my horse, or. But I try. I try and do that, and anything that is going to, like, even scheduling podcasts to record. I like to just open up certain days for blocks of time so that I know that if someone wants to schedule a podcast, to be, then it's only going to be during those times. So then I have other times that I'm going to do the editing, and then, so I'm working
Perfect
on it.
example of being proactive and time. That's time optimization in essence, is that you're dictating as much as possible when you're going to be available and why you want to be available. Also, we all have our own optimal productivity zone. I'm like you, I'm a morning person. By the time I hit 3 o'clock, I can still be really productive if I need to, but I try not to plan really intensive things there. It's ironically, because I like to write, the afternoons are my writing, because then my brain gets to be less structured, more creative to think of things. Now that's outside my optimal zone, but I work well there. Whereas I definitely try to say intensive, client based, either activities, as much as possible. I try to put in my productivity zone, because then I benefit and potentially the client also benefits, because they're getting the best of me when I'm at should be at my best.
That's great. Yeah, I agree with that as well. Like, let the afternoon times, or even, sometimes evening. I know when I get to a certain point, and once I've made dinner, it's like, that's it. I'm not gonna, why bother? Because I know it's not gonna make me feel good, and I'm not gonna have my best, most positive energy available. But I like that, you're saying that the things that are going to take the most focus, have those be during your prime times, right? Is that what I
Mhm,
understand?
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and somebody might be listening to this saying, "Hey, my prime time's after 5 p.m." And the challenge there, particularly if you're work for someone else that's a traditional 9 to 5 job, then what I tell you to do is you begin to then work on creeping your productivity zone further earlier in the day. That might force you to look at certain behaviors that you're doing earlier in the day or in the evening. It might mean you have to go to bed a little earlier, because if you're an evening person, and you can change your circadian rhythms. It takes time and effort, but the idea is you can adjust your productivity zone. But if you don't have to, live in what's comfortable for you and try to get done the most important things during that time.
Hmm. Okay. Do you find that time optimization is more difficult for people that are in structured type corporate jobs, or for people that are more entrepreneurial slash creative by nature, and in that, they're the ones that are creating their, where do you, tell me a little bit what your thoughts are around that? I'm
Ooh,
curious.
that's a good question. As I try to think, I would say many entrepreneurs, newer entrepreneurs, probably struggle with optimization a little bit more, because you, particularly if you're a solopreneur,
Mm-hmm.
you own every single decision that comes your way. I mean, I live it. There's nobody to turn to. There's no committee to say, please give me your recommendations and come back. And so newer entrepreneurs struggling there have a tendency to react a lot as they figure out the cadence of this new life or work that they're doing. And so over time, they begin to learn to say, what is a priority? What do I have to delay? And get better at it. But also, people in a structured corporate environment struggle a little bit, because they get so tied to the routine that sometimes becomes so rigid that they're not flexible enough to want to see, can I change things differently? I think one of the things when I work with corporates and businesses, I've said, please, when a new person comes on board, don't tell the new person we've done that before. We've tried that before, because that deflates things. Let them and encourage them to figure that out. And besides, what didn't work 2 years ago, hey, it might work today. So sometimes in corporate world, people can forget and try and think of new things.
Yes, and I have worked for some very big corporations that, it's change is like, turning a battleship on a dime, not happening.
Right. Right.
And very
Exactly.
much so, oh, we can't do that. And that's clearly why I'm not there anymore. Uh, because that does not suit me well, to be perfectly honest with you. So tell me the difference between Kronos time and how do you pronounce it? Kairos
You said Kairos very well. Yes. Yes. Yes.
and Kronos time. What's the difference? I mean,
So
I
both,
kind of know, but I want to.
oh, good. Well, you can correct me or add to it if I don't get it right. So, both are Greek words. They're actually ancient Greek. They're the word for time. And unlike in English language, where time can mean different things, the ancient Greeks had it separated for Kronos and Kairos. And Kronos is measured time. It is, I spent 30 minutes in a meeting. So you and I were in a 30 minutes in a meeting together. We both spent 30 minutes of Kronos time. It just measured. Now, the Kairos element, that's the qualitative aspect of it. So in that 30 minutes, I may have said, wow, that 30 minutes went by so fast, Sue. This was an amazing opportunity. What a great speaker. And you're sitting there saying, whoa, I am so glad that was the longest 30 minutes I've ever had to deal with. And I can't stand this speaker. And so the idea of time optimization for me is you focus on Kairos, the quality time. You try to make all what you do as much quality time as possible, because then ironically you feel like you have more Chronos time. You have more quantitative time to spend because you're more efficient. Even though a second's the same for all of us, you may find if you plan quality time, you're going to have more time to do other stuff.
Interesting. So when is that why like our vacation time seems to go by so quickly? Because that's stuff that we value, right? And or you're like, wow, that flew by. That week of vacation is like gone already. Meanwhile, the people that were still at their job for that week are like, oh my god, it was the longest week of my life, right? Is that kind of
Absolutely, absolutely. It's why we have. Wow, I need a vacation from my vacation because I've done so much stuff in that period of time that you're kind of like, ooh, maybe I need to rest. But no, you definitely hit that on the head.
so? Kairos time is more of um, the value, right, that you place on or the value that you're getting from sort of like the value that you're getting from the Kronos time. Like you said, if it's a half an hour, it's the same half hour, but it's what value you got from it or what value you were able to create, I guess, during that time. Is that sort of
Well
because the
stated.
name of
Yes,
your
yes.
company is Kairos?
Correct. Yeah, I really looked at this time, and as I researched how the Greeks approached it, Kronos was like, okay, that's just define time. I want to help people have a more rich, flexible life, and so Kairos really resonated with me.
Yeah, I love that. And how do you get people? Because we're very much Kronos. We're tick tock, tick tock. Oh, it's 5 after 4. I got to do this now, and we need some sort of that, like you said, the blocks of time, right, to establish some sort of structure. Correct me if I'm wrong
Mhm.
here. I'm kind of going with this. Yet applying the Kairos thought process around that, what we're going to do in that time block. So, how do you get people kind of out of that Chronos mindset of watching the clock and into more of a Kairos mindset?
So the first thing you have to do is you have to invest some Chronos time or quantitative time to get more rich or Kairos time. So when people don't do any pre-planning, then time feels very Chronos. They consume it. And so the idea I say is the idea is first, make sure that you're investing time to see what the future looks like. And again, I talk about that 2 week look, whatever you choose to define, look at the future and say, what can I do to define that future? It's going to change, but still, what can I do to define that? Then from that, you then have to also take time to self reflect. So, a pattern that I do is first thing in the morning, I look and say, what's on the docket for the day? Then I execute the day, well, not well, whatever it means. But at the end of the day, then I look back and say, what did I do well this day? What do I need to improve upon? And then I look at the next day and say, okay, what adjustments do I need to make based upon how well or I didn't do well today? And then I go get a good night's sleep. And it's amazing. We live in a 24/7 world. I have international customers. So I will wake up in the morning and sometimes somebody's already clarified my thoughts for me before I even started the day. So that's where, again, in the morning, it's addressing what's happening during the day. And you repeat that cycle over and over again. And pretty soon, what you find is that richness weaves its way. The Kairos time starts to weave its way into there because you're constantly trying to hold yourself accountable for the use of your time in the day and then the use of your time moving forward.
Hmm. It's confusing a little bit when I think about that because I love the whole concept and I love how, like you're saying, once you develop that cycle, it's kind of like this kind of goes with the Kronos thing, I think, are really into that to do list. And
Mm-hmm.
this is a different way of thinking about those things that you need to do or create or perform, and adjusting your thought process around how you're going to be able to achieve what you want to achieve given the Kronos time, and then also creating value for the and space in the Kairos world for the things that you did I clear that up or muddy it up?
No, I think, well, let me go back to the to do list that you mentioned because so many people,
Very to-do list focused, right?
exactly. I am too. To do lists are important to me. But the challenge people do is they treat all the to do lists equal, every task on that list equally. And so typically, somebody, let's say, has 10 tasks due that day. They get 8 done and they pat themselves on the back. The problem is the 2 that they didn't get done were the most important ones because they kept delaying because this is easier to do. So now you have 2 big tasks that you have to figure where you're going to put in the next day. So for me, on a time optimization standpoint, in order to get more Kairos time, is you have to say, of those 10 tasks I have, what are the absolute ones I need to get done? And if we use that example of the top 2 tasks, I must get these done today. Then when you get those 2 done and you have 8 secondary tasks left over, many of them are repeatable tasks that so you didn't look at your email at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You can pick that up the next day and work through that. Or if it's a lower level task, then that task that's repeatable, it's there the next day. Chances are somebody's not going to freak out because you haven't returned their email that they emailed you in the morning. You didn't return that day. You waited till the next day to return it. So prioritize that and do the absolute ones that you must get done and give yourself grace on the ones that are lower level.
Okay, that does clear it up a little bit. And I've also heard other entrepreneurs talk about, like, what's going to what's going to make the boat go faster, or what's going to move the needle, or what are the things, and those are the things that you should focus on, like you said, first, rather than those administrative tasks or the busy work tasks. And like we talked about in your bio, watching people be effective and efficient rather than just busy. And like you said, those 8 tasks were busy work.
Right. And gives you a false sense of security. What meanwhile, you've just added a ton of work to yourself either the next day or later in the week.
Right, because then the next day you may also have a couple of big things or important things, valuable things that would move the needle, make the boat go faster, or do whatever. And now you've got, and they need more attention. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. That's fascinating. I love that. Um, how long did it take you to come to? I mean, I know you've been in the business world for 35 plus years, but I mean, finally, what finally pushed your needle to make you, or have you always been aware of this and creating?
I was always had a fascination of time, but I didn't really realize its benefits until a little later. Being in sales, and very, very heavy on the sarcasm here. I knew early on that these stunningly, amazingly good looks and charisma wasn't going to get me anywhere pretty quickly. That it's about the product or service you sell, not necessarily the personality, though that does play a role in it. And I found that as I was working through things, I'm like, boy, when I was using my time efficiently, when I was better prepared than my competition, I usually got the sale. And then I kept the customer or client when I made it as easy as possible to do business with me, because I managed my time well, but I also respected and honored their time in the process. And it wasn't really until I started to manage people that it really clicked, because I'm not going to be the guy to teach you to be the flashy salesperson. That's not me. But I can help you take your natural abilities, what you do really well, and provide you with the time structure behind you to make you really, really successful. And I found then, as I was helping people about 4 or 5 years ago, I found I was helping friends of friends. They're like, "Oh, can you help me plan and manage my time?" That I'm like, "Well, maybe there's a business here."
Yeah, right. I'm
Yes.
giving all this stuff away. Maybe I can start charging for it. Oh
Right. Right.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
That's great. Yes. And I think that salespeople, I mean, just the nature of the beast, right? The nature of the business is, chasing leads, for lack of a better word. I mean, but
Hmm. Hmm.
you're, you've got to keep your pipeline full. You've got to keep your current customers happy. It's really easy. There's a lot of distractions. And salespeople, let's face it, they tend to, be like, oh, pretty shiny thing. I mean,
Very
I've
much
been in
so.
sales. I've been, biz dev and all that. And it's like, oh, squirrel,
Uh
so,
huh. Uh huh.
so yeah, I can see that. And like you said, when you realize that being organizing your time to valuable blocks that could help you make that sale and then service that customer, and it also translated to more business. And you're like, oh, yeah, maybe I am onto something here. That's cool.
And the habits of, like, for example, after a client call, stop for 2 or 3 minutes and write the detailed notes, the follow up, assign yourself the tasks, whatever you need to do. Don't wait till the end of the day when you've been in front of 6 customers or 7 customers, and then you're trying to, what did I say to them at 10 o'clock? That was also a big thing. So developing that process in between and knowing you can wait 5 minutes before you make the next phone call if that's the case, or you need to give yourself a buffer between one appointment to the next in order to either prepare yourself for that call or do whatever you need to do to ensure it's going to be as successful as possible. But again, it takes those blocks of Kronos time in order to make the most of the time you're going to be in front of the customer.
That's great. Wow. Okay. So, David, you've given me a lot to think about today. And I know that you've given a lot of other people a lot to think about today. As we're wrapping up here, what is the one major takeaway or maybe top three things that we can leave people with that can get them on this path more quickly? Or
Well, first of all, thank you, Sue. Again, it's been an honor to be here. I always say I have had a good time. The time has flown by, so that usually means it's been a good Kairos time for me. Uh, uh, so I would say first and foremost, is uh, work on if you're distracted, work on distractions, start small. Pick one thing. If it's your phone, start small. Do that creep, crawl, walk, run. I think the second thing is proactively plan your time. Whether you start out as a day, you go to 2 weeks, whatever it is, continuously invest time looking forward to plan what you think your future is going to be like. And then the third thing is patience. So anything that is good that happens in your life always takes longer than expected. I can list off all kinds of things. So I ask people to think about the 50% rule. If it's important to you and you're going to block an hour of time, block an hour and a half, because it's probably going to take you longer than anticipated. And if it doesn't, yay, you found 30 minutes of free time in order to either start something new or go on social media and check that post that went viral.
Or that didn't go viral, whatever.
Or didn't go viral. Exactly.
Right, exactly. Those are really great tips. I really appreciate that. And yes, this has been very valuable Kairos time for me as well, David. I'm so happy to have you here today and enlighten people and let people know that there is time. It's just how you look at it and how you optimize it. So that's great.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. All right, David, thank you so much for coming today, and have a wonderful rest of your week, and wishing you much valuable Kairos time.
As you as well. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of A Life Worth Being. I hope you found it fun and inspiring. And to avoid a bad case of FOMO, please be sure to click that subscribe button. If you love what you heard today, please share it with a friend, and then hop on over to your favorite podcast platform and return the love with a wonderful review and 5-star rating. It would truly mean the world to me. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and on my website. Links below in the show notes. I appreciate you, and I will see you next week for more fresh insights on awakening a life worth being.